Welcome back, folks, to Free My Pain Now with Dr. Matt Doduro. And we've had an exciting couple weeks. We need to bring our listeners up to speed. We've been really all over the north part of California for the last week. And one of the people helping us really get the word out is going to come on the show today. We've got Cameron George on, and I'm going to introduce Cameron. Hi, Cameron. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having me, man.
Hey, I was just telling our listeners how yourself and Dr. Pompa have been so influential in helping us get the word out about the stem cell machine and powered by TRT. And, I can't thank you both enough. And, just coming back from Dr. Duncan McCullum's office out in Monterey and also Dr. Scott Kramer out in Red Bluff, both of which now have the new lithotripsy device, which one of the doctors is now, Dr. Duncan is calling it the Star Trek medical scanner. That was pretty cool. Did you see that, Cameron?
Yeah, I did. Absolutely.
And I mean, if you look at it and you think about it, Dr. McCoy, I think they called him Bones, he would have the Tricor, I think they called it, and he would, it was pretty futuristic at the time, but they would have the scanner and it would go over the area and they would detect the location. And then once they found that area, they would treat it. And if you think about it, that's what this TRT device does, the tissue regenerative technology. Not only is it a diagnostic tool that many of the professional athletes are now adopting and using, and I believe the Chicago Cubs have 2 of them, and the Cleveland Indians have 1, and they're using it in scanning their players once a month for any injuries that it's really true prevention. And then the second part of the Star Trek portion is, and then once you find that area, we're able to utilize the heat, the light, and the electrohydraulically produced sound waves to actually treat that damaged tissue. So when you use it, you run it over an area, there's no pain on normal tissue, but as soon as we get to an area of damaged tissue or inflammation, I mean, you've experienced, you feel that biofeedback. You're like, oh, right there. And I know when I'm working on a patient or training in a doctor's office that is like the key area. Yes, right there. We know we're on it. And you've had some experience with it as well, Cameron, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I had a pretty nasty shoulder injury that I got from wrecking my bike, riding down a hill while I was riding some trails, cycling. So, and that had persisted for a pretty long period of time, and just it kind of healed to a point, but then I would always wake up in the morning with it really sore. Whenever I moved my arm wrong, it would be sore, and it was right along the left side of my spine as well, too. Really, the whole left upper side of my back was just sort of this chronic issue that wasn't healing totally, and was very chronic as well. So, and we did one treatment when you were up in Park City at one of our masterminds, and then we did another one just a week and a half ago or so on the upper shoulder area. And I have like a 70 to 80% reduction in all of my symptoms, like that quickly. And, each treatment is only really a few, couple minutes long, right? You go over the area, you hit the spots that cause the most pain, and it's just like that, right? And the pain seems to subside within a few minutes, and then the next time you do it, it's less, right? Just like you alluded to, it's finding those spots of damaged, non-healing scar tissue and things, and help breaking it up with the shock waves of light and heat. And then it acts like, that area dumps all these growth factors and exosomes and all of these sort of homing beacon-like signals that signal the resident stem cells in that area and even from your bone marrow to come there and to mobilize the healing process. And it's And that all sounds good. We see a lot of devices out there, and I have the opportunity in doing what I do, and over the course of my long healing process from chronic illness, just how I got into this to begin with, I have the opportunity to look at, examine, try literally hundreds of devices now, both to be used peripherally on knees, joints, elbows, backs, everything, as well as different therapies intravenously, actually injecting these stem cells, doing different types of nutrient IVs. Basically, every form of healing modality that you can imagine, I've tried.
And for our listeners, I got to tell patients and listeners out there, I mean, you are one of the researchers and fact finders for Dr. Pompa in the Health Centers of the Future. You've done extensive research in the last 2 books he's helped that you guys worked on together, correct?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Plus, you have your own experience of being injured and really seeking out. I mean, part of our show is really what you epitomize is you get injured, you become your own healthcare advocate, you become an expert on certain conditions, and that's really what you've done. And that was the thing that I was so impressed with and about you, and that not only did I get to meet you in Park City at Dr. Pompa's Mastermind Summit, but then you and your dad, John, came to Atlanta, and you wanted to kind of dig a little deeper into this device and really kind of vet it out, and you stayed for a few days here, and you got some extra treatments. You got to meet our CEO, John Warlick, and pick his brain. And what did you come away from that 4 or 5 days of your research?
Well, it was just a little more of what I had already experienced and thought from the literature that you had sent me, from all the studies that I had read, as well as just the history on the device and comparing it to some of these other devices that are inferior that we've talked about before. And also with the anecdotal information that I got from various other patients and our doctors in our group, and my own personal experience in Park City. Just a little bit more of what I thought was that this device is really unique and special because, just like I was alluding to a minute ago, I get to examine so many different devices, and every single device has substantial, sometimes tremendous claims behind it, right? Because everyone's wanting to sell their device and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. But whenever you found a winner, whenever you can get very, very tangible results in 1 to 2 treatments, and sometimes a little more than that depending on the severity of the injury, but that's what we've seen consistently, time after time after time. In Park City with our doctors, we had several doctors who were using it all day. You guys had 2 machines there, and obviously a good friend of mine is Dr. Pompa's son, who was on the show before, who you talked to about his back injury, and he was doing a lot of different things. It wasn't a controlled experiment totally, but there was a substantial change in the acceleration of his healing whenever he introduced the TRT therapy, even just 1 to 2 times, both on his hamstring, on his heel, and on his 3 vertebrae that were broken as well. But in addition to that, Hank Williams is one of our guys who works with us as well, and he had a foot that was chronic and it wasn't healing for years and years, and he got this accelerated healing when literally nothing else could touch it, even injections of stem cells directly in the area. So
yes, and Cameron, what's funny is Dr. Williams will be on our guest for next week's show, and I'll never forget what Dr. Pompa said when I met him in Nashville at one of his seminars in March. He said, "You're making a lot of claims that I've never heard any person when it comes to one device." He said, "I'll tell you what, if you can fix or help fix our buddy Dr. Hank Williams, then I'll go and I'll support your device and I'll stand behind it." And which took us a few months, but he has now stood behind his words and has gone on to really help promote this. And he is such an influencer in the healthcare field. So, I mean, some of the benefits that we're seeing, and I know you want these, it decreases pain. It helps improve blood supply. It has a antibacterial effect. It actually activates your own resident stem cells. It activates connective tissue as well and is really good for wounds. And then it also, in non-healing fractures, it will actually turn up the inflammation. So remember, John always talks about that smart modulation part. So it almost tells the body what it needs to do. And I think the big thing behind this is really a couple things. The angiogenic factor, right? And for our listeners out there that don't know what angiogenesis is, Cameron, can you explain a little bit what is angiogenesis?
No, absolutely. It's so tremendously important in any tissue that's damaged or not healing or just functioning suboptimally, right? So angiogenesis refers to increased blood flow through the building of new blood vessels. So if we think of a damaged tissue like, sort of a barren wasteland because you've had a traumatic event to it, or some form of insult that has caused the health of that tissue to deteriorate over a period of time, you have inflammation that usually damages the micro blood vessels, and you have almost an infinite number of these micro vessels that are smaller than you can even see with your eyes. And these blood vessels' job is to carry oxygen and nutrients to the cells to catalyze the healing process. You have to have blood flow to a region in order for it to heal and to maintain the balance of the health of that tissue, right? And whenever you damage the blood vessels in a specific area, it has consequences for the cells. It's just like if you have a country who is totally dependent on an oil pipeline, to sustain its energy systems and its infrastructure, and you cut off the pipeline, then that's a way of destroying the region, right? Because you're cutting off all the resources to that region. The same way in our bodies, we need these pipelines in order to continue to maintain the health of a region, but also in order to get it to heal. And that's the big problem. If you have any chronic condition or if you have an acute trauma that damages blood vessels, chronic condition being something like diabetes, for example, that damages the blood vessels, which is why, end-stage diabetics usually have
amputations,
or, they end up having to have amputations and things, is because the damage to these blood vessels.
Cameron,
a treatment that can help that process along, but it's incredibly effective.
We're going to break for a quick commercial and bring you back for the next second half of this. All right, welcome back to Free My Pain Now with Dr. Matt Doduro, and we have a researcher on today, and this is Cameron George. Cameron, thank you. And we were talking about angiogenesis, and thank you for giving us that detailed breakdown. And I like to say it for the lay people, anytime you have a scab that's forming, if that scab falls off, underneath that's angiogenesis. That's what the healing is. That's where the healing is happening. And it's really, it's going on within our body all the time. There's some great there's some angiogenic foods that you can eat, like cacao, right? That's the cocoa, the real rich chocolate cocoa. I've seen some studies where people who utilize the chocolate in a tea or a drink have 3 times the amount of angiogenesis. So it's so important in our body, and in cancer. What is it's the body has lost the ability to regulate angiogenesis, and so you have too much blood supply to a tumor, and that's what creates that malignancy. So when a doctor cuts through a tumor or cancer, it's really filled with blood supply. It's just all blood. A benign tumor has never had that blood supply. Would you agree, Cameron?
Oh, no, absolutely. And it's an important point, too, whenever you said in cancer, it's the body's loss of the ability to regulate its angiogenic processes and multiple processes, its metabolic processes as well, of producing energy. And it's really in an imbalance of cellular communication or inflammation and damage that leads to a lack of the ability of the cells to communicate effectively. And that's incredibly important. And this sort of goes back to whenever I was reading through some of the publications and was seeing some of the angiogenic effects, and just like you said with Dr. Pompa, we always definitely need proof because we get so many devices that show up on our doorstep and products and various things, and we want to use what works if people are going to spend their money on it, obviously. And, when looking through it and looking at the principles that the device is based on, it was very, and then seeing some of the clinical results too, it was very obvious to me that through these, this heat, light, and shock waves, what's happening here is that it's increasing the body's ability to communicate on a cellular level, right? So it's increasing cellular communication, which is leading to a modulatory effect that allows the body to mobilize a balanced healing response, not just to activate angiogenesis, until the cows come home, until it becomes a problem. But whenever you increase cellular communication, just like whenever you increase communication within any machine or organization, say like a company, whenever you have breakdown of communication between employees and bosses and such, the whole company goes into chaos. The same thing happens in your body too. If you can add signals into the body that help restore that signaling system to where the cells communicate, the body's it's allowing the body's natural healing mechanisms to take place when the body's always trying to move towards self-regulation and healing.
That's a great point.
A very important point.
Our first paper with MTS done in Germany with Dr. Wolfberg Schatzberg, and he talked about that. He said it's the cell before and after, right? We're turning on the mitochondrial. That was the first one, and the resonant stem cells. The second really important publication, and we didn't really even realize how important it was, but it really talked about that cell membrane becomes permeable, and then you have the exosome channels that are opening up, and that's where they felt like you can restore that cellular communication and really start to reverse disease. And chronic disease is really where the tissue, and I think you said it best, it's the loss of communication at that level, correct?
Absolutely. And essentially what you're doing whenever you're putting these very specific shock waves into the system, into that local tissue, is you're just essentially waking up the tissue that's gone dormant because of lack of blood flow and lack of good energy production. And if you can support the mitochondria, which are like the batteries of every cell, either in that local area or across the body, if you can support mitochondria, then you improve everything. Because everything is dependent upon energy. And when you have a loss of energy because of lack of blood flow, because of an acute injury, because of toxicity, inflammation, then you have a loss, progressive loss of function in that area. So what you're doing with this device, you're supporting the body's own ability to heal. You're amplifying the body's own healing response in that area, which is why when you look at the 120 publications that you guys have on this, it's good across the board for so many different types of injuries. It's like it almost doesn't sound real whenever you look at it first. How can one therapy, singular therapy, be good for so many applications? It's because it's working at the foundational level at which the body's global healing process, gets performed.
And when you talk about activating resident stem cells, and with 8 to 10 weeks, you have your own production of stem cells and migration to that treated area. Stem cells are really the beginning of all life. I think you said it best, right? I mean, when a sperm and an egg comes together, that creates, that we are made up of stem cells. And I think that is a cool process, and that is important for every part of tissue regeneration and repair. And
right.
So listen, we have about 6 minutes left, and I really want to talk about something that you and your dad and Dr. Pompa have come across, and it's out of the French Polynesia area, and it's called Kava. Can you give us a little bit about Kava and one of your new supplement lines that's coming out? I know Dave Asprey from Bulletproof Coffee just featured it on in his monthly box to his listeners. Can you enlighten us, educate us about this? Because I think healing is also about feeding the body properly and making sure it has the right environment to repair and regenerate. So tell us a little bit about that, sir.
Yeah, in healing, all we're really doing whenever we're really successful at getting permanent resolution to really chronic conditions is we're removing the interference that's interfering from the body from healing, and then we're supporting the body's intelligence in healing. And we look for any tool that we can find to gain leverage over that process, to take some pressure off the body, that's non-toxic, hopefully non-addictive, and that doesn't contribute to the degenerative process or to the disease process at all. And we know that obviously pharmaceutical drugs can be double-edged swords. So this thing with Kava came about because I had a need for it while I was sick. I was on heavy doses of a specific kind of drug called a benzodiazepine. It's like Xanax or Klonopin, sedative drugs to control seizures, and started researching different botanicals across the world that acted in a similar fashion on the body, that had this sort of very calming effect that goes across into pain relief too as well. And I'd come across Kava multiple times. I got into Kava. Kava is it's a plant preparation. It's actually traditionally a drink that's prepared from the roots of Piper methysticum, which is a small shrub that grows in South Pacific islands like Fiji and Vanuatu and Hawaii and things like that. And it's traditionally used as a substantial pain reliever and a muscle relaxer and an antidepressant. But it's one that has been well studied more than almost any botanical in all of the scientific literature besides cannabis. And it's been shown to be totally non-addictive, has effects very similar in some ways to alcohol, but without the drunkenness, doesn't impair fine motor skills, is totally non-addictive and non-toxic if you get the right varieties and take it in the right form. And so this has been a tremendous tool for us in our doctors group and elsewhere, to be able to control the symptoms of anxiety while someone is trying to get well, and also control pain and control overexcitability in the nervous system, right? Because most people that are chronically ill, it's because of lots of different types of stressors and traumas. And this allows you, it just soothes the entire nervous system and sort of brings a level of comfort as an antidepressant, an anticonvulsant, and a powerful anti-inflammatory. So it really calms down the entire stress system in the body, including those that drive inflammation. So it really, really helps as sort of a safe crutch during a period of time when someone is getting their life back. And you have profound results. A lot of people use it in the same context as they do CBD, but we've seen Kava to be substantially more powerful for most purposes as far as sleep, anxiety, and pain relief than CBD. It's great paired with CBD. I'm not knocking on CBD, though. So it's a great plant that we got into. We produced it as an oil to make it much easier to take, because the traditional drink, it tastes kind of nasty. It looks and tastes a lot like muddy water. And we only use specific varieties of the Kava, because if you get the wrong parts of the plant, then it can be potentially toxic. And if you use the wrong varieties, then you can potentially have side effects. And we're working off World Health Organization standards. They're creating an international quality standard, for cleanliness and for safety. And all of ours are based on that. All of our standards are based on that, except for we take it to the next level, and everything is grown 100% organically and tested for all kinds of contaminants, to make sure that it's the cleanest, most powerful therapeutic product that we can get in a form that's reasonably priced for people. So it's a very, very unique product, and we see it as kind of being the next CBD on the horizon. But the way that we produce it is very, very unique. And we have some even more powerful forms of it coming up in the form of drinks. The oil is meant to be tolerated by just about everybody, even children. So
I got to tell
really
you,
unique product.
I've been on it now for 2 weeks, and even my producer, Sam, was like, "What's different about you? You're so calm." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Isn't that funny? Usually I'm really hyper." But I mean, it's a great product. We've got about a minute left. How can our listeners contact you or learn more about this? And I highly recommend it. I'm enjoying it. My wife has started it as well. So what are the best way to reach out or get this?
Oh, yeah. Well, right now you can go to kavaplex.com, KAVAPLEX, or you can find us. There's a Kavaplex page both on Facebook and Instagram as well, too. Or, you could contact me or shoot me an email at Cameron@kavaplex.com. Any of those, you can check it out, and there's going to be a lot more products centered around Kava in the future. Great extra, the oil can also be used topically as well to assist with pain relief, especially nerve pain. So it's a great sort of adjunct to any pain relief or stress relief type of regimen. So it's really exciting. We really are into it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And your knowledge is really great for our listeners, and we're excited about this new Kavaplex. So thank you, and we'll have you back on in the future.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it, man.
Bye-bye.